It's leftover week for our Three Rivers Challenge at Hickory Croft Farm. Well, to be honest, week one of the challenge this year for 2023 is actually pretty easy around here because we have a lot of leftovers. There's leftovers from Christmas, there's leftovers from our New Year's Eve party, so snack foods galore, but we also have some leftover meat product and things like that. So this week is going to be all about using those leftovers with what we have in the pantry. So for our Christmas meal, we ended up actually eating lamb roast. So we had some leftover lamb, which I've chopped up here, and we're going to use this to make Moroccan stew tonight. Now, we're actually already on the 2nd of January because the 1st of January was pure junk food snacking of everything that was left over from the party the night before. So I didn't cook anything on January 1st, which was fantastic. But January 2nd, we're starting to kind of get things together and use some stuff up. So we're starting off in our pot here. We have some olive oil, a couple tablespoons. Depends on the size of the meal you're actually making as to how much you're going to need in there. But normally you would brown your meat first if it's not already cooked. But because my lamb meat is cooked, we're not going to put it in just yet. I'm actually going to start with the onions. 1 cup of onions in, nice sizzle. Just kind of get those started in that oil. Next, I'm going to crush our garlic in. This is our Siberian garlic we grew right here on the farm. It's got a little more kick than some of the types of garlic. Now, the recipe actually calls for only 1 clove, but we like our garlic around here, and we have a lot of it, so we're doing 2. The nice thing is this is really, really quick if you're using already cooked meat. Next, I'm going to dump in my meat. Now, we're using lamb, but you could use beef or goat. This recipe would work for either of those. Goose meat, I think, would probably even work.
Or venison.
Venison. Venison would actually be really nice for this, to be honest, because it's got a good strong spice to it. I've not tried it with a white meat like chicken or anything, but you probably could try. Hey, if you try, let me know how it turns out, because we have a lot of that as well. But basically you want 1.5 to 2 pounds of meat. So as that is starting to get cooking around there, I apologize for the steam. It's already smelling fantastic. One of the best ingredients, I think, in this recipe is raisins. It seems so odd. Maybe it is normal for Moroccan stew, I don't know. But 1/4 cup of raisins in there. One of the key things to this challenge is using what you have. This recipe actually calls for 1/4 cup of cooking sherry. I don't have that, so we're using dry white wine instead. I'm sure it will taste just fine. Now, like I said, we're using already cooked meat, so this process is all sped up quite a bit. I'm not worried about cooking this meat until it's nice and tender. If you were doing that, you'd basically be trying to simmer this with a bit of water in it for probably about 2 hours. Like I said, we're doing the fast version. At this point now, it's been cooking for probably about 10 minutes, and I'm going to now add our spices. So we need 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of our homegrown oregano, 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric, and it calls for 1/4 teaspoon of hot sauce or hot pepper flakes. I'm actually using some stuff that we'd gotten. I think it came with a Chinese meal or something like that, but everybody has these kicking around, and this is a great thing to use these on, so that's what we're going to do. Use up some of this hot sauce. There we go. That might have been a little bit more than 1/4 teaspoon. We could be feeling that. So we're going to stir this all in. We are to the point we're going to add our final ingredient, which is tomatoes. 1 pound of fresh diced or canned tomatoes. So this is great for in that pantry. Now, we had our long keeper tomatoes, which you saw in our pantry tour video. And as you saw, they are starting to go. They're not going to make it too much longer. So we are using those today in this recipe. So they just go in. I love this because this gives it a wonderful bit of liquid in there. And essentially at this point, we're going to cover this and let it simmer for 30 minutes while we cook some rice. And we're going to serve it on top of rice. So we'll bring you back when this is ready to go. So this recipe is actually from my second favorite cooking book. Simmering Suppers. Now, I don't know how old this book actually is. Give me 1 second. So this book was printed in 1988. It's not a canning book. This is just simmering suppers, great for slow cooker recipe, that kind of thing. But I have converted some of these recipes to canning recipes, including this stew. And it works fantastic. And it just gives you basically a guideline to then follow your own kind of method of pressure canning. And next week for the Pantry Challenge, we're going to be cooking 7 meals out of this book. So that way, whoever wins it will have some ideas of what they got coming when they get this book and want to make some recipes. Well, our stew is ready. We have been simmering this now for about 30 minutes with all the spices, the tomatoes, everything else in there. It smells incredible. I did do a little taste test just to be sure, and it tastes super good. The one thing you'll find if you try this before it's on the rice, it seems like it tastes salty, but once it's on the rice, it's perfect. It's almost got a bit of a curryish type flavor. But my favorite part, I do have to say, is the raisins. You can see a couple raisins there on the end. And I have to admit, I did have to resist the urge to add extra raisins to this because before the challenge, I forgot to go stock up my raisin stash. So I only have enough to make a few batches of this anyways, but we're going to get this dished up. You serve it on a bed of rice. You could probably just add potatoes to this if you did not have rice. I think it would be equally tasty. But basically, there's our meal. So in the spirit of using up leftovers this week, not only did we have leftovers from Christmas and New Year's dinner inside, but we also have a ton of leftovers. Well, okay, not literally a ton, but we have a lot of leftovers still in the garden. We got hit pretty quick with a lot of snow that covered things up. And well, we kind of always operate a little bit behind schedule, as you'll learn as you watch through a few things on our channel. So we're going to show you what's still in the garden and count our blessings that we are able to potentially harvest some of this because the snow is melted and it's almost 10 degrees.
This is really interesting here, our turnips. So we are going to harvest some of these.
Look at this one. It's a beautiful purple top turnip. But as you can see here, we've got some gorgeous kale that was buried in snow and it's come through just fine. Look at that. So I'd like to pick some of this and get it bagged and in the freezer, maybe do a little bit more dehydrating, even though I already put away the dehydrators. That's what happens when you put something away. You always need it back out. Certainly there is a couple bags that we can get harvested. We like to use this for stir fries, things like that, smoothies, all that kind of stuff, which is going to come in really handy for keeping us with some sort of fresh greens over the next 2 months. And here's more kale. Surprise, surprise. So what we have here is our celery, or at least part of it anyways, that we grew in these blue barrels. We had the best of intentions of bringing some more of this inside, transplanting it and putting it into the grow room. We didn't get there. And as you can see, it's gotten toasted because we had some good cold temperature and there had to have been 3 feet of snow on top of these, which might have been what saved them. But there's still usable parts on these. So I'm going to get out here and trim off what I can and basically toss it in the freezer because this will still be perfect for broth or some stews, things like that. Maybe I'll dehydrate some depending on how much I actually get, but I definitely want to get some in the freezer because we need to be able to make some stews and things like that to replace what we're going to use off that convenience pantry shelf. I've gone out and I've picked a bunch of kale that we're going to get weighed and cleaned up and frozen in the freezer for future meals because there's so much of this stuff here that's become uncovered out there now that our snow's all melted. And I mean, it's in incredible shape. So this will be great for stir fries, smoothies, anything like that over the next little bit. Well, almost a whole pound of kale. Stems off, just the leaves, all cleaned and washed, bagged and ready to go in the freezer. I thought this challenge was supposed to be about getting stuff out of the freezer, and instead we're putting stuff into the freezer. But hey, it will only keep growing for so long, and then we're going to have to start using this stuff. But boy, this winter has been kind to us. It's Early morning for us on the homestead. You guys don't get to see this very often. We are not early risers. But today, I'm going to share breakfast with you because really, around the homestead, breakfast is pretty boring. We eat the same thing almost all the time. Basically, eggs on toast. Or today, we're going to splurge with an omelet on toast because we have some leftover pulled pork that's going to be really, really tasty in this combo. So like I was saying, breakfast is pretty simple around the homestead. We grow a lot of eggs, therefore we eat a lot of eggs. Sometimes just plain, sometimes like today we're able to splurge with a little bit of goodies in it. But basically I'm starting with a little of our lamb lard in the pan. Love using cast iron. Onions. Oh, I just tossed the garlic in there, forgot they were on there. That should be separate. Just pressing 2 cloves of garlic into this. This is going to be a 7-egg omelet. We've got 2 kids that are eating with us this morning, and they do enjoy omelets. It's quite interesting. They don't enjoy eggs on toast, but they don't mind omelets. Got to mask the flavor, I guess. The nice thing is almost everything in this recipe was grown right here on the farm, except for the pork. The onions are wall-to-wall onions from our garden. The lard was lamb from our sheep. It's early in the morning. The lard was from our sheep. The eggs are chickens. And the other thing we're going to put in this is some of our sweet Italian frying peppers that we'd froze from the garden this year. We put so many of these in the freezer. You know those large Ziploc bags? We have 5 of them in the freezer full of these peppers because this is a go-to for us over the winter months. Makes it taste like summer. And the other thing we're going to put in here is just a random amount of pulled pork.
You could really substitute any meat.
Yeah, you could. Anything will go with an omelet. But as you can see, we have quite a bit here. But stay tuned because later in this video, we're going to make quiche for a couple breakfasts as well. Hoping to use up some of those goose eggs that you saw in our pantry tour that have been kicking around for a while. But for this one, we're regular chicken eggs. Even though we always have a large amount of protein on the farm, and we produce a lot of meat, a lot of eggs, and we even have beans and things that also provide protein, we still, I'm going to say slightly ration. I mean, there's maybe a ½ pound of meat in there, maybe, for feeding 4 people, which is not too bad. Sometimes it's nice to be able to stretch the budget if you actually are buying the meat. We're blessed that we're able to grow most of the meat, which means it's costing us a lot less than what it would be to buy at the grocery store. But that still doesn't mean that we overconsume it. All right, so we're just going to prepare our 7 eggs here. Nothing fancy. Pepper to your taste buds, salt to your taste buds. That might have been a little heavy, but I'm terrible around here. We do eat a lot of salt. It's just one of those things. Just a little bit of a mix-up. Now, some people add milk to their eggs. I don't. I do find that the homegrown eggs are quite light and fluffy even without, but you can if that is your choice. And then I just pour it in, kind of mix it around a little bit, and we'll just wait for that to cook. And then, of course, the best part, cheese on top. And here we go, breakfast of champions. Last touch is just a little bit of our homemade ketchup from the pantry on everybody's. A little bit of our own dried parsley, but there you go. And you can see served in 2 different ways because the kids don't like theirs on top of the toast, and we do. We're January 4th, and as you've seen, we've been having eggs for breakfast. We eat eggs for lunch sometimes. We eat a lot of eggs around here. Usually this time of year, egg production slows down on the farm and we go through our stockpile. But this year, it doesn't seem to matter. The chickens are still producing 8 to 12 eggs a day. We can't eat eggs that quick. So today we're going to make some quiche, but we're not going to use our chicken eggs. We're actually going to use up our goose eggs. So we're going to take a look in the freezer and see what we can find to put in these quiche. Because if I'm going to make 1 quiche, I might as well make 4 quiche and freeze them. The problem with that is going to be that the freezers are very full. So I want to check and see if I even have room to put them in. And I thought, what better time than to show you the craziness that goes on in our freezers. Now, don't judge, do not judge, but I don't even know what's in the bottom of these things. So hopefully through this challenge, we will get through some of the stuff in here, make a whole bunch of stuff to be jarred on the shelves, and maybe be able to defrost one of them. So here we have freezer number 1. And I know it looks like a lot of store-bought stuff in here somewhat, but we don't grow cherries or peaches or things like that. So when they're on sale, we stockpile those like mad. We do stockpile the blueberries as well, even though we have a patch. It's slow to get going. We're on year 3 now, and it's still not producing enough for our needs. So we do have a lot of stuff in here. But the interesting thing is it's full of goose, and more goose. So we actually did butcher 7 geese right before the new year, and we were only able to get 4 of them in the freezers. So we have some geese to get cooked this week, but since I was talking about the freezers and getting things for the quiche, I figured I would show you this one anyways, just to show you where we're at. But we're not going to really be taking too much out of this right now. I'm hoping that I'll be able to find everything in our other freezer. We're classy. This is our freezer lid holder-upper. So we want to use the rest of that leftover pork. But the other thing I want to try and find in here is some cooked rabbit. This is what was the last of our peppers to be harvested this year. We're going to use these up because, like I usually get behind and forget about things, I didn't bag them up, so they're starting to get a little bit freezer burnt. But we do have a lot more in here, but this will work great for in our quiche. This is sort of how we operate. It's kind of find things as you go and see if you can make it work. That looks like rabbit, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. This is another textbook Stephanie move of put it in the freezer without a label. That happens a lot. So there's one thing of rabbit. Oh, and here we are. Another thing of rabbit. So I think between our pulled pork and these 2 containers of rabbit, we should have enough meat for our quiche. Now, you don't have to put meat on the quiche, but we like it that way. Ah ha ha. Lamb's quarters. We often use lamb's quarters instead of spinach because for some reason we're not very good at growing spinach. But lamb's quarters, the weed, grows like mad around here, and it can be used virtually the same as spinach. So we'll take that up, put some of that in some of the quiche. So I think we're organized to make our quiche for the next couple days. We've got our eggs, milk, the vegetables that are going to kind of be going in this, and spices. As you can see, a whole pile of eggs that we've gotten from the chickens in the last 2 days. So we need to keep going with our egg usage over this challenge. So if you have any suggestions on some great recipes to use eggs that we should try, definitely leave it down in the comments, a link to your favorite recipes, anything like that, because it would be awesome to have some ideas for what to do with these. So for simplicity's sake, I'm actually not going to make the recipe that I linked above exactly the same. I'm actually going to do a crustless quiche. And in that, basically your filling is virtually the same, except for we're going to add a half cup of flour in and mix that all in when we put it in. But I love this for simplicity because all your ingredients just get bunged in there. So I'm making all 4 at once, and then I'm going to just make my fill and pour it over top and cook it. So we're going for an easier method than what was in that video. But I will, in the description below, put the recipe that I use for making crustless quiche for you to check out if you really want to try it. So these have cooked for 55 minutes and are looking incredible. They are quite poofed up. They will sink back down. The ones in the metal pie plates were the rabbit meat ones, and these ones were the pulled pork. Oh, I'm excited to give it a try, but you can see how this poofs up nicely and gets a little crusty edge because of that little bit of flour we put in there. I love this recipe for simple, easy quiche that you can just whoop, and it freezes really, really well as well. Well, January 5th, breakfast was uneventful. We had toast. No, we didn't. We had pancakes. Sorry. Start again. January 5th, breakfast was sourdough pancakes. We didn't feature anything about that in this one. Lunch, as always, is kind of a rushed affair and comes whenever it comes. So we're now like 2:30 in the afternoon, and we said, well, we just want a light lunch. before we have dinner. So we're going downstairs to grab some soup, but I thought I would put some bananas in the freezer. These are bananas that we'd bought, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 weeks ago now, and they'd gone kind of really soft. So we're going to put those in the freezer for some smoothies over the 2 months that we've got our challenge going on. These are going into the freezer that is on our fridge downstairs, which we haven't actually shown, but to be honest, it has very little human food in it. Most of this is cat food. But we're just going to put those in there because I really don't have any space in my big freezers and they will get lost and never found. So, what we're at this fridge for, though, is to get out our geese because I need to cook at least one goose today and then the other one tomorrow. Ooh, dusty, very dusty. So for lunch, we decided to do one of the tomato juices. We're going to show you how we spice this up to make it super tasty. I'll link above the recipe or the video for the tomato juice because I believe we have one. If we don't, I'll edit this part out. But we're going to take this up, spice it up, and show you what we do to make tomato juice into tomato soup. So, soup for lunch. One of our quart jars opened up and on there to heat up. Now, this recipe does already have spices and things like that in it. It's got some garlic powder, lemon juice, that sort of stuff. But to soup this up for a soup, which to be honest is a soup that works great if you've got a cold. We've got ginger, probably about half a tablespoon of ginger. 2 cloves of garlic ran through the press. About half a teaspoon of onion powder. And half a teaspoon of turmeric. So it ends up being quite a spicy soup. We also are going to add a little bit of salt and black pepper when it comes time to serve, just to taste. So it depends what you're in the mood for, how much you want of that. But we're going to let this come to a boil and enjoy it in a nice, warm, delicious mug of soup for our light lunch. So while our lunch is cooking, we're going to work on these geese. So, as you can see, we managed to cram 2 of them in there. We're going to take one out so that we can work with it a bit later. Do you want the big one or the little one first?
Do the big one first.
Big one first. So we're going to take the little guy out and set him aside. And we're going to take this big one and we're going to get him washed up. And then we'll bring you back and talk a little bit about what we're going to do for cooking. All right, so our bird is now clean. We're going to cook this breast side up, but one of the things that really works well for getting the extra oils and stuff out of the bird is to puncture that skin with a nice, I use quite a thick needle, and you just are going to poke kind of not too deep. You don't want to really bust through muscle and have, I guess it's kind of blood that ends up oozing out of the bird. But make sure you get a few pokes in the bottom. Doesn't have to be perfect. One of the reasons that we cook our birds whole, we don't season, we don't marinate, nothing like that, is because for us, one of the most valuable products out of the geese is the oil and the lard. We then can it all up and keep it for use, well, basically all through the year. It's a wonderful, long-lasting keeping oil. So we'll show you when we bring this bird out of the oven, just how much oil we got from it. Well, now we take a moment to sit back, relax, put our feet up for a second, and enjoy this hot mug of tomato soup now, which came from our tomato juice. And one thing I thought of as we sat down was, I can't stand when people say to taste in a recipe for salt or pepper or things like that. So I'm going to tell you, I put a heaping 1/4 teaspoon of salt and a heaping 1/4 teaspoon of pepper into this juice to make a delicious soup. So again, like I said, you're going to want to do that to taste, but that's what we put in and it tastes wonderful. So while our second goose is cooking, we are going to work at getting the first one apart. I was worried I'd overcooked it, but to be honest, I think it's actually going to be perfect. So I did cut ahead, and then I thought, oh, I better put this on video. But at this point, we basically just want to take the breasts out because we will freeze that for slicing for sandwich meat, which you will see at some point later on in this challenge, because that's what we really love the goose breast meat for. But there you can see, it's a nice big piece of meat, For storage, I probably would take this fat off if I'm going to be using it for lunch meat. But basically, one of these breasts sliced up does about 4 sandwiches, which feeds all of us a nice meal. So there's our breast meat, and you can see it's super tender and it's actually still slightly pink, which is wonderful. So I'm cutting out a little bit of the breast meat here that I missed, and I'm going to do a little taste test just as a treat. This is amazing. I have to admit, another part that we've been snacking on is the skin. It cooked so beautifully this time. I'll be honest, I've never enjoyed eating it before, but these birds plucked so well and cooked so crispy. A little bit of salt on the skin, and so good. I won't need any dinner after all. Goose is definitely worth it. I'll show you after we get the second one out of the oven why we like them for their oil. So one of the reasons that we love raising geese is not just for meat, not just for down, but mostly it's for this. This is the oil that came out of 2 geese when we cooked them. This isn't even including the lard that was pulled out of the cavities when we were actually doing the butchering process. This is the oil that came out of the bird while cooking. And I love this because with the price of oil nowadays, this makes the geese even more valuable. So here is our bucket of meat that we took off of the birds that we processed yesterday, the geese. You've kind of seen a little bit about that and the oils and such that we've gotten from those birds. Super pleased about that. But tonight, we're out of leftovers. So we're actually going to have hot beef sandwiches. But instead of beef, we're going to use goose. But, the rest of this meat is going to get packaged up and put into the freezer for a future day. But this will really help us with quite a few meals. I bet you there's at least 4, maybe 5 meals in that bucket for us. So that's going to be really helpful over this challenge. But because our video is getting long, we're not going to do the long-winded talk you through this. I'm just going to show you the finished product at the end. Basically, I'm using lamb broth to make gravy. We used 4 of our Yukon Gold potatoes, noodle beans out of the freezer with some carrots. It's going to be a fantastic meal. Store-bought bread, but that's okay. Starting tomorrow, I'm back on the sourdough kick. So stay tuned for that in next week's Pantry Challenge video. Final dinner of week 1 for the Pantry Challenge 2023. We are looking good here. We've got mashed potatoes with our little bit of parsley in there. So good. But we're about to sit down and enjoy this, but I wanted to have one final word. As you know from watching the Pantry Tour and the beginning of this challenge, we are allowing ourselves a budget for dairy. And at the end of each week, I'm going to give you a grand tally of what we spent that week on any type of dairy product.
Or any other food for that matter.
Well, yes, because we've already said, if there's a fantastic deal, we're not going to pass it up, but we're still going to try and stay in our $100 budget. So this week, I did buy a 4-liter of milk for $6.99, Reed's Dairy. Just wanted to make note of that and also say we're looking forward to next week and doing some recipes out of that book.